We have Polly Toynbee first, journalist and Vice President of the British Humanist Society. Akhil Ahmed, who's Commissioning Editor for Religion and Head of Religion and Ethics at the BBC. Tony Jordan, acclaimed scriptwriter and Managing Director of Red Planet Productions. Ralph Lee, Channel 4's Head of Factual and Deputy Chief Creative Officer. And Roger Bolton, who's former editor of Panorama and a trustee of the Sanford St Martin Trust, who are sponsoring the session. Welcome to all of you, and thanks very much for being here. And we're going to have a first look, we should say, at some new programmes coming up later this year, and there's a chance to meet panellists as well after the session, because there's a drinks reception afterwards. But first, to set ourselves off, we thought we'd get some stereotypes of religious television out the way. So what do you think of when you think of God on the box? Have a look. So that's, I suppose, a look back at the history of religious television. I suppose there is a question about just how religious we are. And of course, there was a controversy when the Prime Minister said that we are a Christian country. And a few people jumped up and said, no, we're not. And the 2011 census revealed that a quarter of us now describe ourselves as having no religion. And that's up from 15% in 2001. So to kickstart our debate into creativity in religious programming and religious programming per se, let's hear two opposing pitches from two of our panellists. We've asked them to do a 90-second pitch. So Roger Bolton first, followed by Polly Toynbee. Roger, given that those with no religion are growing, those numbers, why do you believe we should be putting more God on the box?
Well, if I say that's total parody, of course, and it was a good joke, but absolutely ridiculous as an introduction to a discussion on the potential of religious programming. That's an object lesson how not to do it. Let me make it clear. I am not for promoting religion. I am not for asking special treatment. What I am saying is that religious literacy has never been more important, and that the potential of programmes in the field of religion and ethics is far from being realised. It's a rich and it's an underpopulated creative area. And when I say we, I mean the Sanford St Martin Awards. I'm one of the trustees, and we don't make anything. All we want to do is to reward the best programmes. And what we see over the past, well, 10 years, let's say between 2007 and 2012, is a 35% reduction in the amount of spending on what might be called religious programmes. That's come out of the ITC. This is against a background where a survey, the latest Theos survey, says that 59% of people believe in some form of spiritual being. So there's the spending going down. There's the experience when we're trustees of brilliant programmes, but fewer of them being made. And we think that this is a crisis in a sense. Why is religious literacy so important? Three reasons. The first is we can't understand who we are if we don't, and we can't understand our art, our literature, our music, if we don't understand the role Christianity has played in our past. We can't understand the non-Christian immigrant communities in this country if we don't understand what is frequently the most important thing for them, is their beliefs. And we can't understand the world and world politics, and you can just see what's going on at the moment, if we don't understand religion. So it's never been more important to be religiously literate, never been more important for broadcasters to see that we are, or help to see that we are. But aside from that, there's a real self-interest in programme makers. This is the richest areas in many ways in programming, because it deals with, and religion deals with, the most important questions. Who are we? What's the purpose of life? How should I live? We're a moral people. So we're not arguing you should be a Christian. I'm not even arguing you should be religious. I am saying you need to take the religious literacy seriously, and there are massive creative opportunities. There's an audience there for it.
All right, Roger, I'm going to have to wrap you up.
It should not be thought to be a narrow sectarian area. Because
you've gone over your 90 seconds. Also, it was just meant to be a bit of fun, that little opening montage, and we are going to see some best practice later. Well, we'll ask later about how you define religious television, because I think that's one of the issues. Polly, your opening pitch, please.
My opening pitch is that I don't think there should be any reserved quota for religious broadcasting. I think that's a huge mistake, this kind of advertorial for God. And the moment it comes out of a religious lobby, whether it's the sponsors of this programme, of this event, it's immediately suspect. It has an agenda. It breaks the idea of the impartiality of reporting in broadcasting. I am strongly in favour of programmes about religion. As Roger says, I completely agree. It has never been more important. It's very important to have the history, the ethics, the culture, the stories. Our understanding of religion is absolutely vital, never more so when half the world's on fire because of religion. But there's all the difference between something that's called The Life of Muhammad and never really questions whether he existed or not, or something by Tom Holland looking at the history of Islam, which about which there was such a row, it wasn't allowed to be repeated. What
not true, Polly.
was it not?
We did repeat it. And it's
You did?
always been-
Oh, fine. Anyway, it was
Also,
brilliant.
the question whether
We
we did actually ask whether he existed or not as well.
A wee
so-
bit, but not really.
All right.
There's
Finish your point.
Religious programming is the wrong idea. I want lots about religion, but I want it to come from factual. I want it to come out of a context where there isn't a starting assumption of reverence or belief. 78% of people never go to any religious service. When people are asked, better than the census question, are you religious? 65% say no. People are very interested. They want to know, but they want to know from a trusted reporter who is not coming from,
Okay.
well, I'm a religious person
Got to stop
for a
you.
religious department.
And the 2011 census was 75% said they were religious and 25% said that they had no religion. So
It depends on the
33.3
context in
million
which it
Christians.
came.
Okay, all right, well, we'll get to that in a sec. Akil, you are the only remaining religion commissioner on TV. Roger's saying you can be very creative with religious television. It taps into who we are, and we're simply not doing enough of it. Do you agree?
Well, clearly not. No, I don't agree with that. I don't think Roger's necessarily pointing the finger at me, or if he is, then we'll have a chat about that, obviously.
No, I want
But,
but I should say on this that we're in danger at Sanford St Martin of being the BBC Awards because 3, 4 and 5 are making, and Sky, so little.
Well, and
Exactly,
that's something we're going to come on to
yeah.
in a minute. But, and you raise a good point, which is, of course, Akil is the only religion commissioner
Well-
on terrestrial television, and the BBC is the only broadcaster that has quotas.
if you have a title, and I'll leave Ralph to talk about some of the great stuff that they've done as well, but in terms of what do I think that it's really important, I think it's actually important people watch the stuff as well and actually realise just how different and difficult programming can be. So Polly makes the quite, an lazy assertion, say that we didn't question that if Muhammad existed. Well, we did, and you know what? When you do things for Channel 4, as if when I did the Quran at Channel 4, and we suggested it was being read, large chunks of it in the wrong language, so therefore has a different meaning, very controversial. When you say in the life of Muhammad and have people using language like he is a paedophile, or he is somebody that is a warmonger, or he didn't exist, or Mecca didn't exist, I tell you what, I'm a Muslim and I could have been killed for saying that. So when you sit there and say, oh, you didn't do it, or it's a bit, or religion organisations or departments can't make programmes because they're going to be biased. Listen, I did that, so it doesn't actually, your argument doesn't stand up. The fact of the matter is, as a subject, it's incredibly important, and whether you call something religion or not religion, we have in the BBC a diversity of programming. We actually do across the whole of the BBC, I think 7,800 hours of religion. Now, a lot of that is on radio, 6,000 of it on English regions, to be fair, across all the different networks. But in terms of our network television, it's about 160, 70 hours of TV. And some of it, which Tony will talk about, isn't even classed as religion, but I actually consider it to be religious programming as well. We do a lot. You can have everything from Christian worship all the way to the Ottoman Empire series, which doesn't get much bigger than that. If you want to understand what's going on in the Middle East, well, it was religion and ethics that came up with that idea and made it. It wasn't current affairs and it wasn't history.
And we'll have a look at the Ottoman Empire in a bit. Ralph, for many years your department had a religion commissioner, but then lost it 5 years ago.
Yeah, I can come back if they'll pay me enough, yeah.
Exactly. Why is that? Was it the case that the channel just decided we're going to have less religion on it because we don't need religion on the channel?
There was never someone, or even Akil did other hours of current affairs when he was there, because Channel 4's never carried so much religion programming that it should need someone doing that as a full-time job. So when Akil left to go to the BBC, my view was the job of putting religion onto Channel 4 could be done by the specialist factual team who do science, history, arts. And since then, we've continued to commission and broadcast important programmes ranging from the Tom Holland film that Polly mentions to Forethought, to the Ramadan season, to a recent season about Pentecostalism. Our kind of commissioning hasn't sort of slowed down or
Are you
stopped
doing as
a
many
result of
hours
that.
as you were?
We don't
5
really
years
count it
ago
out. I
when
mean,
you had
truth
somebody
is,
to
you know,
champion
in the
it?
time since that post went away, we then initiated Forethought, which was a daily 3-minute slot on Channel 4 in peak time after the news. So rather than count hours, you know, that was for 3 years we ran that. Every week we had a different question to be discussed by people with different perspectives, and it gave us a chance to put, I mean, the important thing about Channel 4 is we're not going to do established religion so much, we're always going to look for either creative ways of doing it or alternative points of view. And the great thing about Forethought was we could have humanists, we could have Jains, we could have Hindus, we can have Muslims, and so we really managed to represent through that prism sort of all
Right,
kinds
so you're
of
saying that you
different
don't
points of
bill it as religion, but it's embedded within the schedule.
We said it was religion,
is
thought and
embedded.
ethics. I think
Okay.
it's quite important,
But it's also very
unlike
cheap,
thought for the
very-
day.
It's also very cheap. And the other thing, Ralph, is if you say...
In a good way or a bad way, sorry.
cheap in a financial way.
Oh, no, I don't think that's true, actually.
Well,
Well, it was on
but,
every, it
but
was
if you
very
say...
expensive to Channel 4 to put that on in peak time every day, where we could be putting more commercial film.
Right,
So-
you're talking about the revenue raised by the programmes, not by the money spent on them.
Both things are important.
But if you said, you know, it's a statement, if you said, as you did in the time of Keel, we're going to have 10 one-hour programmes in peak, which is going to deal with religion in the broadest sense, with budgets, you know, the same level as for everything else, it's a statement, and it would bring out of the independent community a whole raft of ideas that they think probably at the moment you're not interested in now.
I'm open
Yeah,
to
but
those
unless
ideas.
you
I
can
always
say,
have been.
here's
I've
the
discussed it
target,
with any
here's
producer
the
who
Right,
comes to
let
me
Ralph
with a
Here's the
answer that
money.
point.
If producers want to come to Channel 4 with creative approaches to religion, I'm very, very open to it. But I think saying, we're going to do 10 hours, we're going to do 20 hours, we're going to spend £1 million, that's not the right way to do it.
Okay.
Paulie's right.
So there's a problem in the quotas. All right, I just want to bring your attention, and you'll be interested in this, Roger, because, and of course people sitting here, we did a short survey to get the thoughts of programme makers around the UK. And we'll show you responses throughout the session, but this is the first slide that we're going to show you. British broadcasters are likely to commission projects about faith and religion as much as any other subject matter. 62% of them disagreed with that statement. 62% of them disagreed with the statement that broadcasters will commission projects about faith and religion as much as any other subject matter. Now, we should say it's a snapshot because there were 50 responses, so we're not, you know, claiming we're Maury. But it's quite interesting nonetheless. And Tony, you're a programme maker. You made Nativity for the BBC. You're also doing The Ark, which we're going to see later in the year. So in your experience, are there some channels who are less receptive to ideas that have a religious theme to them?
No, not at all. And in fact, you can replace kind of faith and religion with any other genre, and you probably get exactly the same results.
Do you think?
Yeah, of course. I mean, if you said British broadcasters are likely to commission projects about the emergency services as much as any other, they'd probably go down a bit, but you're still going to get a kind of, you know, nobody's going to...
But if you put health there, or crime there, or actually quite a few other subjects, do you not think the responses would be different?
Yeah, possibly, but only because, but not because, this looks as though it's kind of anti-faith and anti-religion, and that's not the case. And in fact, you know, the reason that I don't go through religious departments is exactly because it is, because I'm surrounded by 20% of this and 30% of that, and I'm going to upset them, and they'll be upset, and you can't do that, and you got ring fence this, and it's actually stifling the creativity. So, in answer to your question, there is no broadcaster, Ralph included, that I wouldn't feel confident in going with a religious content in some way project that I was passionate about, because I would pitch it, I'd be passionate about it, they'd see that, and I've got a track record for delivering it. So I don't think it's an issue. I think for me, I come at it from a completely different way, which is I believe that when you have quotas, and
I don't believe in quotas, by the way.
Okay,
Well,
well,
one-hour slots
whatever that
is
is, whether you
quota.
ring fence money or tell Ralph to do 10 hours a year or whatever you would like, the problem with that is that you then tend to it becomes niche broadcasting almost. It's almost like religious programme makers will then come and crawl all over the slots. And the broadcasters think that's what those slots are for. And they're all on it like 3 o'clock in the morning on a...
Right, so you don't sell it. What it's saying is you don't sell an idea as a religious idea. You just go and sell a creative idea. It doesn't have the word religion attached to it.
No, exactly. When I first pitched Nativity to BBC One, or the story of the Nativity, my pitch to them was, I don't want this to be a religious thing. I want to reach people like me. Because if my fiancée came home and said to me, good news and bad news. Good news, I'm pregnant. Hurrah! Bad news is it's not yours. But don't worry, it's God's. I am not going to say, blessed am I. Right? I'm going to start throwing cutlery around and it's all going to go terribly wrong. So I want to do a piece that addresses those things. I want to take a mass audience and make them see that story in its own right and maybe even give them the opportunity to believe it should they choose to do so.
So there is creativity, Roger, when you were saying
I said that we had
at the
some
very
wonderful...
top in your pitch.
I'm keeping accused, probably because I don't express myself clearly enough, for a number of things I don't believe. I said there were brilliant programmes. I said there weren't enough of them. I don't believe in quotas, but I do believe in occasional series, which are just as medical or whatever, you have series. I do think that the problem with Tony's position is that if you're not as talented as he is and with the track record that he is, a lot of commissioning editors will not see the potential and will have too narrow a view of religious programmes. My view is that programmes that are about why are we here, what's the purpose in life, how should we behave in a moral sense, are on the edge of being religious programmes, because in the end, what religion is trying to do is provide answers to those questions. The questions are universal and others should be the subject of drama, of comedy, of everything else. Don't draw it too narrowly, and I don't draw it too narrowly.
No, but it's whether you weave it in or whether you have a slot, which you were suggesting, whether you have slots or series that are defined as religious programming.
Well, you have some documentary series, like you have current affairs series, like you have medical series, like you have crime series, but you have others as well.
But does that go back to quotas? And quotas was touched on earlier, Ralph.
What constitutes broadcasting is antiquated. I'm sorry, Roger, but I think, you know, if you take the Ramadan season that we did on Channel 4, the single most positive effect that had was to say to 3 million practicing Muslims in Britain, hey, one of our sort of national broadcasters is paying attention to you. We get that you're there. We know what you're going through. Here's a bit of your lives reflected back to you. Now, we didn't need a series to do that. We didn't need hours and hours of peak time television. We did it by putting on the call to prayer on the first day of Ramadan, putting short-form films in after the news, and making a documentary introducing a generalised audience to Ramadan and what that meant.
Oh, that's excellent.
And
That's excellent.
None of that required a 10-part series or 6 hours at 9 o'clock on a Sunday or any particular analytical television. It wasn't analytical television.
But if you're not careful, you're also talking about narrowcasting. You say I have an outdated view. What we're also interested in, and should be, or have to be, is communicating between different communities. Not just focusing. This idea that you have to focus on a community, focus on a particular religious programme.
You then broadcast it to everyone. I mean, you don't just broadcast to them, but the fact that they noticed that, I mean, Channel 4 is also about a diversity of voices and reflecting the country back to itself.
I want to go on to, and it touches on what Roger was saying, I want to go on to the idea of having a set number of hours, which the BBC does have, of religious programming. So it's obliged, Akil, to do 110. You say it's doing way, way more than that at the moment. But do you think that by being obliged to do a certain number of hours of BBC One and BBC Two programming, you're sort of straitjacketed into doing something that is less creative?
No, not at all.
Because even
something
like Ralph's doing.
Well, no, but even when I was at Channel 4, we were obliged then. They're no longer obliged, but they were obliged then as well. And the difference is, when I went on both occasions that I've been, my career, half my career was in current affairs and factual, not in religion. But on both occasions that I've been made a head of religion, it has been to go in there and sort out a bit of a mess. So in factual programming mainly. And in terms of at Channel 4, then you did have quotas that weren't working because the programmes were going out at 5:15 on a Saturday. Now, you know, I didn't go there to knock out programmes at 5:15 on a Saturday. I was told to go there and make sure these programmes went out at 8 o'clock and 9 o'clock. And by the time I'd finished, they were all at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. They were, you know, 1 Oscar nomination, 2 Emmy nominations, all sorts of awards. And that's not in religious awards. These are mainstream awards because they were mainstream programmes. I would go to Kevin Ligo and then Julian Bellamy and say, I've got the first ever interviews with failed suicide bombers in Palestinian suicide bombers. That's not going out at 5:15 on a Saturday. That's going out at 9 o'clock on a Wednesday. So the issue is that you can have, if you want to call it quotas or a slate, which is what we would use in more modern language. If you have a slate, it's what you do with the slate. So,
okay, so you can do prime time, creative programming on religion with a religious slate.
One of the reasons why I was interested in going to the BBC was the fact that it was actually also more diverse in terms of what we could offer. So on one hand, yes, there are things which you could class as Christian worship, but even then, you know, 2.5 to 3 million people watch Carols from Kings. And this year it's the 60th anniversary programme, and it's a lovely, you know.
Polly,
all
there's
the
an
way-
audience for it.
Oh, Carols for Kings, of course I listen
But there's
to
an
it.
audience for some of the other
Absolutely.
stuff
So
that
do all
Keel's
my
talking
fellow
about.
humorists. We all say singing carols.
No one
About
says
Richard
no to-
Dawkins
no one
sings
says no to
carols.
me when I invite
That's
them to
great.
Carols from Kings,
No
yeah.
harm, no harm in that, whatever. And I'm not saying there's any harm in it. It's just that there is a kiss of death about something being a religious slot.
Why is
It's
that,
rather
do you
like when you
think?
turn on the radio on a Sunday and you think, where's the Today programme? You think, that sounds interesting, that sounds good stuff. And then it begins to dawn on you that there is a sort of agenda that ties all these things together. You say, oh, yes, it's God Day.
But
it's-
what is the religious slot?
Polly,
Sorry,
well,
on
hold on,
television,
Polly.
what's a religious slot?
if a programme is only devoted to something, it's much, you know, I really want to know about religion. I think it's very important.
Yeah.
I think the factual programmes are really important. But the moment you protect a slot, it becomes suspect. For one thing, you know that most of the people involved in it are religious, because they more or less have to be in the BBC. So that immediately
can I just say,
makes you
at
say,
some
hang
point-
on, this is
have
not...
you
This is
just
false.
started a recruitment
Okay.
process?
Follow, who is
What-
arguing? This is a false argument. We're not made... Look, there's a distinction between licence fee payers who are religious are entitled somewhere in the output to have programmes directly for them. You know, they pay the licence fee, they're entitled to it. But in a more general sense, Polly, I agree with you.
You just told me that you shouldn't target.
No. There's
So Muslims who pay their licence
No.
fee entitled to programmes from the
No,
BBC that target them?
There's a distinction between programmes of worship, which I think have a place, and the licence fee payer and are entitled to have them somewhere, and the idea that more generally you have separated slots only for the religious, if you like, to make, which I've never agreed with. I oppose, and I'm with Polly on that.
Okay.
So she's confusing the two things. in
All
my
right.
view.
Okay. I want to have a look at some best practice from all of you, actually, where you think that religious or faith-based programming is working. Let's have a look at some clips. Polly's, Roger's and Tony's choices. So let's start with Roger first. And you chose Rev and Simon Sharma's Story of the Jews. Why do you think those are two examples of best practice in
Well, I
religious
like Rev
broadcasting?
because apart from being just very, very funny...
Is it religious broadcasting?
Yes, because it's dealing with people. It's not because he has dog collar on, but that's a vehicle for exploring a raft of things. Our prejudices about people on the street, and alcoholics and others who we'd normally walk by on. It has a character in the middle of it who is, you know, most would say a total waste of space, but he's not a waste of space. He's a human being. You know, and it has that. If religion is given, it gives anything, gives the idea that every individual is fundamentally of equal value. That's not a problem. That's not a result of the Enlightenment. That's the result of the idea that everybody is special and had a soul. And what the Rev does is do that. So even the most unattractive people, you actually find out, you know, their position is understandable as well as funny. And also you have somebody who is, in Tom, is trying to do the right thing, and it's extremely difficult to know what the right thing is. And then when you try and do it, it often goes wrong. Wonderfully funny and having a depth that most comedies don't have.
And,
because there's a
as your
mix of
mic's
colours.
fallen off, I'm going to let you put it on. Just say that that's not the kiss of death, Rev, for you. Is it?
Fantastic.
You were saying that,
Two
okay.
brilliant programmes, absolutely wonderful, fought their way onto the schedules, nothing to do with religious programming. They're just great programmes. And of course, you want a history of the Jews. Of course, you want a funny Rev. Brilliant, terrific. I think you're cheating by calling them, oh, they're religious. They're not religious.
How do you define what is a religious programme?
my
Is a religious
come under.
programme just by dint of having somebody who has a religion within it
Well, shall
somewhere?
I tell you on those two particular projects, I know which one was defined as religious programming. It was History of the Jews, because we define it to Ofcom what we consider to be religion and not, and that one was, Rev wasn't.
Rev isn't.
And both are, in my view.
But they are, in my opinion, both religious programmes, yeah.
And Citizen Khan would be the same.
Definitely as well, yeah.
I think that's
Although just a great comedy.
ridiculous.
Okay.
Well, I'm glad that you're managing to boost your quota by...
No, it's nothing to do
things
with the
that-
quota. We're not putting
Those,
it in the
those
quota.
hours don't count, do they?
They
The
don't
Rev
count
hours
at
and the
all.
Citizen
They
Khan
don't count
Okay,
at all. I just think that they're very good programmes to help the population understand about religion
All right.
and the diversity in our country.
Polly, we could see which one was yours, obviously, because it's the Richard Dawkins and the Unbelievers. And I think this sort of... maybe, I don't know whether you think it's a false dichotomy or it actually exists of religion versus science. Is that fair? Do they
Well,
clash
it's the way
in that
Dawkins
way?
put it, because he is the great exponent of science, and he puts it in the most controversial way you possibly can. I don't think that's the only way of discussing it. I don't think that's necessarily how humanists discuss it. But humanists, of course, are not allowed on Thought for the Day. We're not allowed on and ethics. but and ethics doesn't include in the BBC's terms
Well, got half an hour.
anything that isn't religious. Nobody can go on Thought for the Day who is not a bona fide, proper, paid-up religious person, whether it's Anne Atkins, the
All right, but
actress,
we're not
or
discussing
whoever.
Thought for Day because that
We
would be
went
a
quite well.
whole
We
other
got
discussion.
halfway through.
And yeah, if I had the editor of the Today programme here, I would do it, Polly. I really would, believe me.
It's not the editor of the Today programme's fault, I'm afraid.
Okay, beyond his pay grade. What do you think? What you chose Tony Nativity, which is one of yours.
Which was,
You
I
chose
thought
your
was a very good idea. I chose my own because I think that, you know, what I loved about Nativity and the whole journey of doing that is that, I mean, much as I love specialist factual kind of, I'm a bit like Polly. When I hear it, I see it, I hear it on the radio, I feel like a God botherer, and I don't listen to other God botherers bothering God. The thing about Nativity is that it was aimed primarily at a primetime BBC audience. It was aimed at that primetime soap audience, and it was stripped from BBC One over 5 nights, and it reached, and we were getting figures of like 5 million people. And I think if that had come, the reason I think that that's best practice is I think that if that had come through, with no disrespect to Kill, I think if that had gone through the religious thing, it would have been a completely different show. I think I would have been constricted in some way, and I'd have been aired at 11 o'clock at night.
You had
I think.
complaints, though, didn't you? Because it was a contemporary drama.
We haven't got anything that goes at 11 o'clock at night.
What
I wish
about-
we could. We could be more experimental.
What if it would not have been
Okay.
that front and
Everything's in
centre on
prime
BBC
time.
One in the way that it
Great
was.
stories.
Yeah,
I mean, are you
exactly.
surprised? A story as good as that is, you know,
not
Nicola Wright's as
surprised.
good as you.
But it was
why are you
a
surprised?
contemporary drama. It did draw some complaints because of some of the things you did within it.
But I think
were,
that's
for
what
example-
we should be doing. That's exactly what we should be doing. We should be challenging with these stories because that's kind of where we are. The moral tales of that I find in religious text are the things that fascinate me, because I think that they can give us almost like a blueprint for now if you understand the moral tales. And the same is with the Ark. I think that if you challenge them, and you are always going to get people that complain. And the problem is the people that complain are the people that also want quotas and are trying to protect things, and they want the status quo. And what I'm saying is, let's not do that. You need broadcasters to go along with you. I can't do it on my
Akil,
own.
would you have commissioned it had it come to you?
Of course, if I could afford it.
Okay.
That's the problem, isn't
All right.
it? I mean, look, we've got actually, just put on that note, we have got 2 dramas, you know, and the only drama that really sells is biblical stuff as well. So we have 2 biblical dramas that are in development. One with drama, BBC drama, because actually at the end of the day, I mean, Ralph knows this as well. You know, we can find the money, but ultimately it's all the same money. It's the BBC's money, but drama has those kind of budgets. The only reason why a production company wouldn't come to me with any of these programs is because they know
You haven't got the money.
they might as well just go to the person I'm going to go
All right,
to.
we're going to have a
That's
look
not
at your...
tricky. I don't think I would bring because I think
No, not
that-
you, other people.
I would
But
bring-
actually,
There's a big
some
problem
dramas
here,
have them.
I think organisationally, and it comes out in part from Polly's sort of thinking. You think religion is there, like the religion department is in Manchester, and it does religion. There's a bit of religion it has to do, but it should be everywhere. Religion should be in bed with the science department. It should be in bed with the arts department. It should be in bed with every other department.
And we get criticised for it. You've criticised me
But
for
it
that
is,
publicly.
Roger.
That's
But
exactly what we did.
you're talking, a bit like Ralph said, what you're describing finished 15 years ago. Religion isn't
I
made
thought
by...
25 years ago,
isn't
with my
made
age, but
by...
no.
But it isn't made by people in Manchester.
Can I get Ralph to finish his
But you
point?
need a fusion.
Ralph, you're saying that what's happening here is that Roger is saying that it should be embedded throughout everything.
Well, that's what we've done.
And that's what
actually,
Channel
I look
4
at
are
those
doing,
clips
but
and
he's
I think we should
criticising
change
it.
the title to TV God's Holy Grail, because we're doing quite well.
All right.
I think that's an example. I mean,
Let's see
BBC
your
drama,
examples and Akil's
BBC specialist faction,
drama.
BBC. They're doing your job for you as well, Akil. They're adding to your...
Why am I complaining?
Brilliant. Great. What's not
Let's
to
have a
like?
look at your best practice. Akil and Ralph. Gogglebox. Does Gogglebox count as religious programming? Do you think?
We're not counting here, are we? We're saying that we've threaded it into the output. So,
Why?
I mean,
Because it's got Reverend Kate Botley in it.
I don't know why don't you count it though? Just to be nice to the rest of us if we knew exactly how much, how many hours, how much money.
I don't know. I literally don't count it. And I'm, you know, when
Well, if
asked
you
to
don't count it, how
contribute-
can you know what you're doing?
Well, you tell me, Roger. You know, you hold me to account for it.
But Ralph, why did you choose? Why your choices? Your choices were Call to Prayer, which you've spoken about, Gogglebox, and Secret Life of Students.
Yeah, well, what I wanted to show was how religion can sort of be threaded through other programming. You know, people who are religious and practice religion don't just do that. They have rounded lives like the rest of us. And so I think the idea that you separate somehow religion into this kind of, you know, other category is not reflective of how people actually experience it. So when you have something like, I think it's quite interesting, there's a 19-year-old girl, she's a fresher at university in Leicester. The fact that she goes to church on her own, finds a community there, seeks a place to think about it, and then she texts her friends about it, I think is really important to reflect. That's not a religion programme, that's a 10 o'clock programme aimed at young people, on a documentary on Channel 4. Gogglebox is one of the brilliances of the series is the diversity of its casting, and the Reverend Kate is just one of a sort of ragbag of crazy British people who sit and watch TV for us every week, and occasionally her critique of television reflects her character and her belief and her profession, but not always. You know.
So it's as good as Rev, it just performs a different function?
Yeah, different function. So, and I put the call to prayer on there because we still, alongside that, we still do occasional moments like this year. We did something in Lent about Pentecostalism because that's such a big, growing part of Christian life in Britain, to try and sort of reflect the life of that community. So that's our current approach, rather than counting the hours.
This is what happened with Call to Prayer. Ramadan and Ding Dong.
I mean,
it became Channel 4's most complained about broadcast of that year, so there were more than 2,000 complaints about it, with 1,658 specifically about the call to prayer. Why was people so worked up about it, do you think?
Well, it was July last year, and the Woolwich murders, I think, took place in March. So it was quite a difficult period for Britain and its Muslim population, I'd say, and yet we'd been planning it for some time. There are 3 million Muslims in Britain. Ramadan last year fell in July and August and was going to be very, very hard for them. So we thought it was a good idea to sort of reflect that experience back at them. And so the thing that got the front page was the idea of broadcasting the call to prayer, which some people felt was a kind of, you know, a provocative act.
Do you know when these complaints, whether they came after the media coverage or before? Because
largely after, because that's how people knew about it. But a lot of it was an orchestrated campaign on the part of a very small minority of people who sent me, I mean, these complaints were pro forma emails that were sent to me. I woke up in the morning and found myself with 2,500 emails.
Who were they? Were they kind of BNP?
Yeah, it was an EDL group, I think, who told all their members and friends to, you know, use the internet as you can now to complain in a kind of, you know, extreme way. And actually, at the same time that I was getting that email into my inbox, you know, 100 times a minute, I was getting a huge amount of emails from Muslims in Britain saying thank you for doing this, you know, and what, in fact, we got praised in the Catholic Herald for doing it. I mean, people, you know, across the piece felt actually that's a really important thing to do. You're acknowledging the practice of Islam in Britain. You're trying to open people's eyes to that and present a view of Muslims in Britain that isn't seen through the prism of jihad and violence and extremism. And I think, you know, I'm extremely proud of having done it. I think the Sun, you know, there was a line in the thing that I wrote in the Radio Times that said that there would be more people in Britain actively involved in the practice of Ramadan than actively involved in celebrating the anniversary of the coronation, and that gave them something to get pissed off about. But I stand by it. It's entirely true.
Akil, you chose Life of Muhammad, The Ottomans and Citizen Khan. We've already discussed whether Citizen Khan counts as a religious programme. It doesn't come from your department, so, you know, but you think it reflects religious programming.
Yeah, I do. Well, those three particular programmes, a bit like, you know, the Call to Prayer, what they are is there was just an attempt to explain that I could have chosen lots more as well. But how how important it is to understand a particular misunderstood community, but also to understand subjects which people have no idea about. So, you know, when we talk about Citizen Khan, that's about the fact that this is, you know, when I've got a daughter who thinks she's Alia from Citizen Khan, you know, and they're always calling me, oh, that's such a Citizen Khan thing, Dad, if I come in with 15 things because it was cheap, which is what he does. And so I'm sadly seeing more of myself on that, and I'd like to think it's my dad I'm seeing, but actually, as is being pointed out by my teenage kids, it's me who I'm seeing. And with things like the Life of Muhammad, well, going back a bit towards what Ralph said as well, which is if you've got 3 million people who are paying a licence fee, then you need to understand this. But more importantly, I'd been trying to make the Life of Muhammad for about 6 or 7 years. It was a getting into Mecca issue, because I wanted to be in Mecca and Medina and all those places. And I first started it at Channel 4. We would have made it at Channel 4 had we gotten permissions then. Didn't get the permissions until 5 or 6 years down the line. Funnily enough, after the Quran, which they really liked, in Saudi Arabia. So we got that access, even to say the things they didn't want to hear. We got in. I felt it was important to explain who this person was. You know, we hear the name Mohammed, but who is he? What does he believe? And why do people use his name in the acts of terror? And then with regards to the Ottoman Empire, you know, I've been trying to make that since I was a young man in Bosnia in '92. You know, and even I've been a commissioner for 10 years before I commissioned it. I hadn't even commissioned it from myself. But 2 years ago, I realised it was, I think the moment had finally arrived to fully understand the Arab Spring, to fully understand the world we're in now with ISIS and all these kind of characters.
Well,
and
maybe
the
you need to do it again. Maybe you need to do a new programme based on the Islamic State and the Caliphate.
Well, it's funny you should say that because we are, but that's being repeated right now around the world on BBC World News.
But it didn't rate particularly well. At least it didn't perform in its slot as well.
Well, it got about 1.8 million.
It averaged 1.1 with a 4% share, which underperformed its slot, which is 1.7 and 7% share. No, I mean it's just a point, which is
that's incorrect,
you might not,
by the way. Yeah.
It's incorrect.
That's incorrect. So basically,
average
it was about
1.1 million.
Yeah. Well, the first episode was 1.8, then it goes down, but around to about 1.3 or something like that. So, well, the thing is, that particular show, on BBC Two at 9 o'clock, if you get between 1.5 and 2.5, 3 million viewers, you know, for a difficult subject like that, you've done very well.
Okay. Well, I mean, the Story of the Jews launched well with 2.2 million and then fell right back to 834,000.
About the size of Newsnight.
Yeah, about the size of Newsnight. Yeah. But the thing is, you know, it's a genuine question, which is, do religious programmes...
on a good night, as my colleague is saying.
Do religious programmes rate less well in their slot than other programmes?
Not true at all. So, in fact, on BBC 4, when we do Simon Sebag Montefiore series on Byzantium, on first transmission, episode 1 got 900,000, and the slot average is less than 300,000. You know,
That's because they're not religious programmes. They're
really tell you what, have you watched it? It's full on
artistic
religion,
and history programmes about religion,
it's not your
but they're not
definition,
religious programmes. They're not done from a religious department, from a religious person or religious... Well, yeah, but it's, you know, I think that's cheating. To take something which is brilliant...
No, you want us to cheat.
Hang on, let Polly finish her point. Why do you think it's cheating?
You know, what we're talking about is the idea of religious programme as opposed to factual programme about religion or about, you know, the Ottoman Empire, which is history, big time. History of the Jews, history, big time. Simon Sharma.
Does that count as religious programming?
No, I don't think it does at all.
Where does it fall into history and where does it fall into religion?
I immediately become suspicious.
So religion is things
the moment it comes
programmes that preach to you, and
it comes
religion
from
is not
somebody
history.
who is religious, who is putting out something that is of a religious flavour and religious as opposed to about religion. Well, you know, most of the people who do the regular slots in your religious regular slots are religious people. And as I said on Thought for the Day, you're not allowed anyone who isn't religious. You can't have other ethics, other people thinking, other philosophers. They've all got to be branded genuinely, authentically religious people.
That's one show in 7,800 hours. You know?
Yeah, and a lot of the rest I'm delighted
I don't actually know what the religious persuasion is of some of the people who present for me, quite frankly, and it's irrelevant. I mean, Sian, did it ever come up what your religious persuasion was when we hired you?
No, and I do a programme on a Sunday called Sunday Morning Live, which is morals and ethics and faith. I mean, if anybody wants to know, I shall tell them. You know, my grandfather was a Presbyterian minister, my father was an atheist, and I have no faith, which I think makes it easier for me to present a programme like that, because you're in a position where you are open to all faiths. Anyway,
and more people watch it than Andrew Neil's show. Yeah.
So there we are.
Mind you, it's a tough slot.
But we're talking about the BBC, and the BBC has specific programmes.
Two things come out of this last conversation. One is that Polly has an extraordinarily narrow definition of religious programmes that the rest of us on this panel, I think, don't share. And, you know, which I think is a misleading one. And the second thing is, if you have somebody who's committed, who has a responsibility and is committed to doing certain sort of programmes like, you know, we've just had outlined there about Mohammed and so on, they will get made because there's somebody there prepared to fight it through the system.
Right, so, but ITV will not. And I spoke to somebody senior at ITV this morning and they said there is no money to be made in religious programming. Why would you put religious programming on?
So don't employ anybody who wants to put religious programming on, so self-defeating.
So this is the number of hours that ITV gave to religion. So in 2004, when there was a commitment, it was 104 hours. Then Ofcom reduced the number of hours, so 2005 52, and then it went to 2 hours.
What were their 2 hours? I'd love to know.
Oh, well,
What were they?
Sean, the answer to your question.
it was a carol
is-
concert, actually.
Yes, it was, yeah.
Right.
The answer to your question about does religion in programming increase or decrease ratings is written on the wall. I mean,
Yeah.
if
But you're saying that when you
patently-
put religion in programmings, it does rate
No,
well.
I'm not.
So maybe
Keel's
it's just the
saying
way
that.
you
I'm
do
not
it.
saying that at all.
I'm saying it does. I mean,
I'm
you
not
can
saying that
argue
at
whether
all.
I'm cheating or not, but actually, not for everything, but in some of the programmes it does. You know, I mean, Neil Oliver's Sacred Ones of Britain got 2.5 million.
If,
I mean, we
it
could
did,
go on and
it
on.
would
you know.
populate the schedules pretty
Yeah.
quickly, because that's what, you know, broadcasters do. They chase populist genres. So, you know, if nobody watches cookery programs, you're not going to see any cookery programs. And I think if religion programs, if putting religion in programs made more people watch, you would see them on ITV
But there is,
and Channel
there is an
5.
audience for it. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
the TIP's got 5 million people. That, you know, the audience that came to the Bible series in the States was caught everybody by surprise. All the networks went, what? People want to watch this. So there was an audience for it.
And also, you don't define things just by religion. I know, by rating, sorry. I remember when I was at Channel 4 being asked to speak to the advertising buyers, and I was thinking, why do they want to listen to me? And I was told to explain to them the kind of programme that we had. And then straight afterwards, the head of advertising said, there you go, you are not going to get that level of good quality programming on any other kind of commercial broadcaster. That's why we stand out.
Right.
So effectively, you know, it depends what you define as not just what religious programming is, but actually why you're doing it in the first place. And at Channel 4, at that particular moment, and it's different now, so Ralph can speak about now, then the whole point was we want these good quality programmes in the heart of the schedule because it defines that we are different. And with BBC Two and BBC and all the programmes we're making, we just want to be in the heart of the schedule, making relevant programmes that explain the world that we live in today. Because
Yeah.
religion is involved
And the
in
world we
that-
are,
in that
exactly,
world.
religion is involved in a lot of the issues that are coming up, especially in the news today. And you mentioning Newsnight, Roger, made me think of the controversy over Newsnight at the moment, which is you broadcast somebody who represents Islamic State, you get enormous numbers of complaints. It's going to be a very, very difficult topic, I imagine, when you do come around to doing it, which is the new caliphate, the new redrawing of the boundaries. Are there some issues which are just a bit too hot to handle that you think, if I do this and represent what's happening in religion now, that I'm just going to get so many complaints, it's not worth
What
it?
you have is a responsibility. If you were not to do things about the caliphate or whatever, it would, you know, you must do those things. But at the same time, if you allow, because there's nothing else across the networks, people's view to think that that is the main representative of Muslim thought, then you've got a problem. At the same time as you put those things on, and you should do, you have to ensure elsewhere in the schedules are programs that show the reality of Islamic life elsewhere in the world and the reality of Muslim belief and the fact that so many Muslims would have nothing to do remotely with. I mean, the great danger of current affairs is always that we're drawn to extremes. We want two sides, black and white, yes and no, 3 minutes. You're drawn to the extremes,
All right.
Can I
and
just
that's
answer
the
that point
danger.
a minute?
You can, but I'm going to show you a clip which illustrates Roger's point, and then we'll discuss it later. Let's have a look at extremes on television, actually. And I suppose that the thing about the Scientology, the Amish, the Hutterites, they all outperformed in their slot. So we asked the question to programme makers, does extremity in religion, I suppose, rate highly? And here's what they said. 80% agreed or strongly agreed that extreme and unusual beliefs are more likely to rate well with the audience than moderate beliefs. Why, Ralph, do you think that's so?
Well, I don't think the audience, when they're engaging with those programs, is necessarily thinking, oh, great, tonight it's the Hutterites, it's not the Jains or the Buddhists. Do you know what I mean?
No, but
Saying,
you
I
watched,
like this lot because
you
they're
watched
really
the
extreme.
Sweeney because you wanted to see him.
Yeah, I mean, that's just great. Also,
have a go at a
Scientology is utterly
Scientologist.
fascinating. We're drawn to extremes across the piece, not just in religion. So you put those in the category of documentaries that take you to open up a world that you don't normally see, of extreme behaviour. Also, people are quite fascinated often by alternative lives. You know, like the Amish are always somehow have this sort of cast a spell over people because they've just chosen to live in the modern world in a slightly alternative way, and I think that can be intriguing. But I don't think in the audience's mind it's like, oh great, it's not a boring Buddhist tonight, it's an Amish. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. But is there a danger if you focus on the extreme, then you're not getting the mainstream, you're not actually
maybe, but you're
understanding
conflating quite
people's way
different
of
things
life.
there with, you know, polygamous Americans and jihadis. You know, I mean, I think I would completely agree with Roger's point earlier on that television has a massive responsibility to helping us decode and understand and contextualise the modern world and what's going on in it. And so whether it's Akil's programming about Islam, whether it's Tom Holland's programme about Islam, whether it's the BBC Three documentaries looking at the lives of young Muslims in Britain today, I think we've got a really, really key role in a way in helping us understand what's going on.
You do have to hear those. You do have to hear those extreme voices. You really do. There is a great danger otherwise that if you never hear, as it were, the Ian Paisley voice, you don't really understand what is going on there. I think there's a great danger that, and I'm sorry to keep going back to Thought for the Day, but I suppose it's the only bit that I'm forced to listen to, if I can't get to the off button quick enough.
Do you not think that sometimes there's an interesting thing to say on that,
there would
even
be,
if it's attached to a religious person?
One of the dangers of that is that it's a very, very homogenised, they've all been put in the blender, and you can't really tell the difference between Mona Siddiqui and Bishop Butler, and they're all very nice, and they're very good, but they're not really about what the heat and fire of religion is, or why it's so scary, or why half the world's in flames because of it. And you need to hear, and I would quite like on Thought for the Day, a bit more of the real fierce, scary stuff, and not, it's all very nice.
Okay. I want to just show you a quick quote, and Akhil, I'd like your views on this, that one of the people who responded to the survey said that the main positive focus when it comes to religious programming seems to be Christianity, and there is a negative focus on Islam. And I suppose with events in the news, that seems to be the dominant way of portraying
I think
Muslim opinion is militant or extremist Muslim opinion.
It's a difficult one to answer. I mean, how long have you got, Mary? We haven't got enough time. Basically, the news dictates what people think about Muslims. Now, I could start reeling off loads of programmes from my Channel 4, well, before Channel 4, when I got into religion by running a season on Islam for the BBC 12 years ago. All those great docs on Channel 4, all those things like the Ramadan thing on Channel 4, the things that we've done. The fact of the matter is people aren't obviously watching them, or if they do watch them, they're just the negativity around the news story is the problem. And also, I actually think, and I've been part of my job isn't just a commission; it's a lot wider than that. And I've been having conversations with colleagues, and we have to think about the language that we use as well. Right now, if you're an Islamic, if you refuse to shake the hand of a woman, or you strap or you strap a bomb round your chest and walk into a shop and press the button, you're an Islamic extremist. No, one's an Islamic extremist, one's just a liberal idiot. But the fact of the matter is, everybody's an Islamic extremist. So the language we use, we go from 0 to 100 in about a nanosecond. So I'm a bearded Muslim in the Daily Mail. You know, I mean, look, it's just a crappy 1980s hangover, but I'm a bearded Muslim. So the fact of the matter is, the language that gets used,
yes,
and the stories which are quite negative.
In the way, Tony,
we can't win.
You don't get that in Christianity, and you do at the moment because what's happening in the news. So inevitably, I suppose, there's a positive focus on one faith and a negative on the other. Is that something that you're aware of?
Yeah, I mean, it always goes back to extremes. Extremes are really good for television, and it's even in the news. The new caliphate. It's kind of the more extreme, the more newsworthy, the more that we focus on it. And with Channel 4, you do extremes Amish, but the reason you do the Amish is only another version of Big Fat Gypsy Wedding. It's got nothing to do with religion. Yeah. It's just the fact that it's extreme, and therefore it will bring you an audience.
The problem is both news and drama are drawn to conflict. And that's almost inevitable. It makes it crucial that elsewhere, this is why, you've got to make sure, you can't make news representative because news is in a way the unusual, it's conflict, it's what's visible. That's why it's crucial that elsewhere in EastEnders, religion is treated as a normal thing. I mean, when I was doing the Sunday programme, I was a bit fed up that we always used, in the end, looking at it, we always were attacking implicitly the Roman Catholic Church for its attitude towards AIDS and refusal to allow contraceptives to be used. Understandable. But what we didn't do ever was a programme about all those Catholic priests in Africa dying, nursing AIDS patients. Two sides of a similar story. You shouldn't do one rather than the other, but you should do both. Okay. The obligation is there. If you're doing the extremes, make sure the audience understands it's the extreme.
Well, let's ask the audience here whether, with a show of hands, please, if you think the case has been made in the session for more, less, or about the same amount of God on the box. More God on the box, whose ever God you believe in. Okay, about 6 or 7 less God on the box. About the same. About the same. Roger, so we're doing all right.
They're all Anglicans.
We're not going to go through the faith of every single person here. A couple of questions. We have been extended to have time for a couple of questions. Yes, one here at the back. Thanks very much. If you could say who you are and where you come from, that would be really useful, and who your question is directed towards, if it's directed towards a particular person.
Okay, hi. My name's Niamh O'Connor. I'm with an AIM High training scheme in Northern Ireland. It's a production training scheme. I kind of have a split question for two people, if that's okay. So the first one's for Roger, and he was talking a lot about ethics and morality and how we live, and putting that in with religion. And should that not be defined as ethics and morality rather than specifically religion? Because obviously...
Okay. So why does morality and ethics have to have a religious umbrella when those who aren't religious have, they would argue, as many morals and ethics as those without?
And of course they do, and it doesn't have to, but it is a very convenient way of, in television terms, of exploring those issues. When we did a Heart of the Matter series with Joan Bakewell, we explored those issues. We didn't say the religious answer was the right one. Other people were there, but it created the space. The problem is there aren't many other genres, if you like, whatever, that create the space. They're so action-filled that the space for thinking, particularly in television, is rare. And I'm very happy if anybody who wants to talk about ethics and morality smuggles, if you like, those stories into something with a religious heading. It's focusing on the questions religious try and find answers to, but others do as well.
Niamh, if you don't mind, can I just ask it up, because we're running out of time? Yeah. Is that fair? Yeah. Sorry, if there is another question, the person next to you, so you can blame him.
Also from the same scheme that Niamh's
there we go. Okay.
Tim,
worked out in the end.
from Belfast in Northern Ireland. Just reference Polly's joke about the off-button thought for the day. I assume you do as well pay your licence fee. I go for the off button when the Formula One comes on. Got no interest in it, and lots of other different programmes and types of programmes. I'm paying the licence fee, and people of faith who are religious, I'm not myself, but people who are of faith pay the licence fee. Why should there not be provision for religious programming for them, any more or less than any other niche kind of programming for any other person?
Polly?
Because it's not impartial. Broadcasters are impartial. You might broadcast about religion, you might interview people who are religious, you might have a philosophy discussion with a number of different people from different perspectives. There is something really strange about the idea of religious broadcasting for religious people, in which all of the other rules about impartiality broadcasting are put to one side. It's in a completely different part of the brain.
But they're not.
Well, they may be or may not be, but they might be. It's a different idea. The very idea of religious programs.
It is difficult to quantify.
It's it's not just difficult to quantify. You know it's coming from a perspective. And when it comes to, that slot where everybody sighs and groans, and editors of the Today programme desperately want to be rid of it, but it doesn't belong to them.
But there are some who don't have a faith, who just think it's a time for reflection, and it doesn't actually matter.
There aren't very many.
If it has
it gets very, very low.
Okay, we're going to have another session on Thought for the Day.
The normal
at a different Edinburgh Festival.
But the point is, if you want a moment for thought, which isn't a bad idea, or indeed I'd quite like it if it was kind of good readings from Bible or Quran or something, but as opposed to rather naive, trying to make it topical thoughts from only religious people about the news of the day, excruciating.
All right. We're going to have to, there'll be time to discuss this in more detail. Thank you very much for your question, because there are drinks afterwards. Just quickly, we did say we were going to show you a couple of clips of new programmes coming up. And so, Tony and Akhil, could you just briefly say what your programmes are, and then we'll play them to the audience.
Mine is called The Ark, which will be on BBC One prime time later this year, I hope. It's retelling the story of Noah, and I've combined the version in the Bible with the version of the Quran. So in my version of Noah, there are 4 sons, 3 get on the ark, and 1 doesn't.
Jeopardy.
It helped. It was a great dramatic device.
Akhil, what's your clip?
We got a clip from Sacred Rivers with Simon Reeve, and it's a 3-part series for BBC Two, and he'll be going to the Yangtze, to the Nile, and to the Ganges, and we'll be telling stories about religion and the history and very contemporary things about pollution and war, conflict, etc., etc.
All right.
And and I suppose I could be accused of smuggling religion through travelogue, but if it gets a lot of people to understand what's going on in that part of the world, then we keep talking about ISIS. Actually, the real war is going to happen when Egypt blows up the dam that's
when
been
there's
built
no
in
water.
Ethiopia.
That's right.
Well, yeah.
Okay, we're going to have a look now at a clip from ARC and a clip from Sacred Rivers. Thank you very much. Would you watch either of those, Polly?
Absolutely.
There we go. There we go. We have unity on the panel. Thank goodness for that. Thank you to all of you for taking part. Thanks to the audience here. And just to say as well, thanks to the sponsors of the session, who are Sandford St Martin Trust, and they are going to be hosting a networking drinks. Hope you'll go there. We should say support as well from the Jerusalem Trust and Picturewise Productions. So the Festival Terrace opposite. And as Dave Allen used to say, may your God go with you, whichever God you believe in. Thank you very much, all of you, for being here today. Thank you.